I want to welcome you to the Semaj MindSpa radio show. Our theme, saving our boys, saving our men. I'm Dr. Leahcim Semaj, psychologist, griot, you name it. We try to stand in the breach, fill the gap, provide the clarification. I want to welcome, starting definitely with welcome to Trelawney, welcome Jamaica, and welcome friends across the world. Welcome to the Semaj MindSpa. Now, today we tackle an issue that affects every family, every community, every school, every church, every workplace, and ultimately the future of our people. Topic, saving our boys, saving our men. Because it's basic. If we fail our boys today, we will inherit broken men tomorrow. Simple as that. And when men are broken, families suffer, communities suffer, economies suffer, nations suffer. So it's not about blaming women. It's not about attacking men. It's not about politics. It's about understanding. It's about healing. It's about solutions. And it begins with a simple truth. Every man was once a little boy. Basic as that, huh? Every successful man, every violent man, every loving father, every absent father, every leader, every criminal, every husband, every homeless man, every entrepreneur, every prisoner, every president, every man began as a little boy. We want different men, we must raise different boys. It's as basic as that. And that is the reality of life. And we have to deal with that situation, or we reap the consequences. Simple as that. Now, let us begin at the most important place to begin in. Huh? There is a crisis that we are ignoring. So let's begin with evidence. Across many countries, including Jamaica, boys are struggling. Now, consider some of the troubling trends. Girls outperform boys at almost every educational level. Girls are graduating from secondary schools at higher rates. Now, I love to just put in the basics in terms of, say, Jamaica. Jamaica has 7 all-boys schools and 15 all-girls schools. And the all-girls schools have 65% at least female. So you understand where the stats are set to begin with. Girls dominate most university programs. In some classroom, boys are becoming educationally invisible. All right? So you name the faculty. You name the faculty. And we give thanks, we celebrate the gains that the females have made. But we have a problem. Health. Men die younger. Let's even be more basic. Of the 15 leading causes of death, men dominate all 15. Anything that kills people kills more men than women, with one exception, death in childbirth. And I bet if men could have children, we probably would die at an earlier pace too. Men are less likely to seek medical attention, very poor health-seeking behavior. Men are more likely to engage in risky behavior. And we see this in so many areas. Of the people who die at work, 90% are men because of the nature of the jobs they do. Mental health. Men are less likely to seek counseling. Men are more likely to suppress their emotions, more likely to self-medicate, more likely to die by suicide. Female attempt suicide at a higher rate, but men are more quote unquote successful at it. Crime. The overwhelming majority of violent crimes are committed by men. The overwhelming majority of homicide victims are also men. So there are times, when I hear about this question about violence against women and so on, it's important that we put things in context, because the death rate of men, what is happening, is we can't just pretend it's not so. We can't, because this is the reality we have to deal with under every single day. Family. Many boys grew up in limited involvement with fathers. And it is becoming more and more dramatic. And when you hear grown men talk about situations, I've had a man tell me that, listen, he doesn't know what to do. He doesn't know how to behave around children because he never had a father. He met his father when he was about 35. And his father told him that he never knew his father either. Many men enter adulthood without positive models of masculinity. So the question becomes, how do we save boys before they become statistics? Because that is the reality that we are now contending with. Now, the man who, this emotional aspect is critical. Huh? We have romanticized the silence. Huh? How men, and some people call that strength. We have celebrated the stoicism. We have written songs and built proverbs around the man who does not bend, who does not cry, who does not break. And yet, the statistics tell us that the man who does not bend is also the man who snaps. The man who does not cry is also the man who pressure finds its release in rage, in substance, in violence against others and himself. You've heard him say pressure bust pipe. You all also heard the saying in Jamaica, anywhere in Marga, it pop. In general, we never speak about the struggles of men. It's kind of a reflexive response in some quarters, a kind of bristling, as if addressing male pain means dismissing female pain. Let me be absolutely clear. The suffering of women in our society is real, documented, and urgent. But I've always believed that we are not competing for pain. The empowerment of women does not require the abandonment of men. And the healing of men does not come at the expense of anyone else. No one else. That's the reality we have to deal with. So without any kind of embarrassment, we want to talk about this. What I'm saying today is that we have a generation of boys becoming men without the emotional architecture they need to survive. And the consequence for those boys, for the women in their lives, for the children that they will father, for the community that they will inhabit, those consequences are catastrophic. We are paying for the crisis every single day. We pay for it in the crime rate, in fatherless homes, in premature death, in the quiet desperation that sits behind so many masculine masks. So the question isn't whether the crisis is real. The question is, what are we prepared to do about it? What are we prepared to do about it? Now, let's go back to looking at boyhood. what happens at that stage? Yeah? A generation ago, boys learn manhood differently. Many of us grew up surrounded by fathers, grandfathers, uncles, coaches, teachers, tradesmen, farmers, community elders. Boys had apprenticeship into manhood. Today, many boys are growing up in a very different environment. Let's talk about the digital father. Instead of learning from father, many boys are learning from algorithms. TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, gaming platforms, influencers. The internet has become the village. Is there a problem? The village has no quality control. Some voices teach wisdom, others teach anger. Some teach responsibilities, others teach entitlement. The internet can inform a boy, but it cannot raise him. Basic as that. It cannot raise him. Now, think about the message in Jamaica and the Caribbean especially. Received from the moment he's old enough. Big boys don't cry. You have to be strong. Don't let them see you weak. Man up. Walk it off. Stop bawling like a girl. These are not emotional messages. These are the standard operating procedures of Caribbean boyhood. They come from parents who love their sons, from grandmothers who are trying to prepare them for a hard world, from uncles and community elders who believe they're building resilience. And I understand the impulse. I truly do. The world can be brutal. And there's something in the instinct to prepare a child for that brutality. But here's what the science of psychology tells us. And I'm speaking now as a psychologist with decades in the field. When we teach a child to suppress emotions rather than to process emotions, we do not make him stronger. We make him more fragile. We create an internal pressure cooker with no valves. Now, what do boy needs the most? I've been living this. I've been observing this. I've raised 2 sons to manhood. So there's some basic observations. Boys need 5 things. 1, presence. Not presents. Presence. Presence. A boy needs someone who shows up, who notices him. Someone who say, I see you. I see you. He can count on that person. Presence. 2, a boy needs purpose. Boys need challenges, responsibilities, goals, a mission larger than themselves. And I just reflected on my own childhood. I was a Cub Scout. I was a cadet. These are some of the institutions that function within the school system to provide boys with challenges. Various activities at various levels. 3rd, protection. Not overprotection now. Guidance, boundaries, structure. I see the example so many times that there's so many boys growing up without somebody telling them that no, you can't do that. No, that's not acceptable. So they get pushed on and dared by their colleagues and others who literally don't necessarily mean them good. But boys need protection. Protection from themselves, protection from predators, protection from persons who don't mean them well. Fourthly, boys need praise. Many boys are starving for encouragement. One sincere compliment can alter a life trajectory. One sincere compliment. And, you know, some parents, mean well. Let me share a situation with me and my mother. There's some mothers who are experts at negative reinforcement. And my mother, God bless her soul, I love her dearly, but I remember in my first form at Kingston College, I came second. No, I wasn't. This is the A stream, the brightest students, and I came second. When I took the report card home, my mother asked if I have a problem with first. If two is my favorite number. I felt deflated. But that was her way of trying to push me to excellence. It's called negative reinforcement. It worked, but I feel deflated. So the next year, I doubled down. I came first in 2A. Again, the bright stream, the best students. When I took the report card to her, my mother laughed. Now, I thought she was laughing with me. Only to realize that when she stopped laughing, her question was very big. She said, hold on. Is pure fool what KC now? You come first with this? I felt so deflated. Not only must I come first, I must have a perfect score. I said to myself, I would never ever do that to my children. It worked, but it left a bitter taste in one's mouth. Yes, we need praise. We need not a kind of backhanded praise, not negative reinforcement. We need positive reinforcement. And the fifth requirement, boy needs possibilities. Boys need hope. They need to believe. They need to believe my future can be bigger than my circumstances. They need to have that vision. They need to have that dream. They need to see the possibilities that, look, things can happen and they can overcome. Boys learn very early that some things are acceptable and some things are not. They learn to shrink their emotional lives to fit the permitted space. And the permitted space for male emotions in our culture is extraordinarily narrow. You are allowed to be angry, yeah. You are allowed to be proud. You might be allowed to briefly, publicly, joyful when your team wins or if your child is born. But sadness, fear, loneliness, confusion, grief, these are contraband. Now, what happens to those emotions? Do they disappear? No, they go underground. They find other forms of expression. Sometimes they emerge as aggression, sometimes as withdrawal, sometimes as risk-taking behavior, speed, substances, sexual conquest, anything that provides a momentary escape from the weight of unexpressed internal life. And sometimes, far too often, they emerge as that most final expression, self-destruction. That's the reality. That's what we're up against. I have sat with many men in counseling situations over the years, and one of the most consistent things I've encountered is this: a man who cannot tell you what he feels, but his body, whose behavior, whose relationships are screaming it, they speak loud. The language is just encoded. And part of our work, part of what saving our boys require, is teaching them a different language before the encoding becomes permanent. It means looking at our curricula. It means having genuine, uncomfortable conversation about how we socialize boys. It means mentorship. It means role models who demonstrate that intelligence and emotional literacy and strength are not mutually exclusive. It means showing boys that the most powerful thing he can do is to know himself. What this suggests, folks, is that, one of the things that we have to do is to redefine masculinity in terms of how it has been inadvertently structured. One of the greatest challenges today is confusion about masculinity. Some believe masculinity is toxic. Others believe masculinity means domination. Both are wrong. Healthy masculinity is not domination. Healthy masculinity is responsibility. A real man protects without controlling, leads without bullying, provides without boasting, loves without possessing, serves without seeking applause. I mean, yes, these are aspirations, but if we don't have these positive aspirations, what do we reach for? The strongest man in the room is often the calmest, not the loudest, not the most aggressive, not the most feared, the most emotionally mature. That's who he is. Now, you understand that a lot of work to be done because we're way back. How do we heal? How do we heal our men? What does healing look like? Healing is a word that has become fashionable. Huh? You see it in social media. You see it on T-shirt and self-help hashtag. And I say with no disrespect, because the popularization of the concept of healing and balance, it's a good thing. But I find that when we talk about healing in the public square, we're often speaking a language that resonates with women far more readily than it resonates with men. Men do not, as a rule, show up for healing when it's framed as healing. They show up when it's framed as strategy, as performance optimization, as problem solving, as getting an edge. And I want to say something that might be controversial. There's nothing wrong with that. If the entry point for a man's inner work is, I want to be a better leader, or I want to perform at a higher level, I will meet him at that entry point. Because once he's in the room, the real conversation can now begin. All right? So we have to find a way. So here at the MindSpa, our approach is grounded in what I call quantum transformation facilitation. The premise is that meaningful change can happen not necessarily through slow, grinding resistance, but through shifts, through reframes, through those moments where the man suddenly sees himself and his situation differently. And once he sees it, he cannot unsee it. That's the quantum moment. And men, in my experience, are extraordinarily capable of those quantum moments. They are just rarely invited into the space where those moments can occur. All right? Now, what does healing look like for men? Let me offer some concrete realities. It looks like a man who learns to name what he's feeling before it names him. Who can say, I am not angry, I am frightened. Or I am not withdrawn, I'm overwhelmed. This is not weakness. This is the most sophisticated form of self-management there is. It looks like a man who can ask for help, not because he's incapable, but because he's smart enough to know that no one gets far alone. Asking for help is not the admission of inadequacy, it's an act of strategy. I've always said, that especially in the school system, we should definitely incorporate the coaches into the process of the male socialization. They will listen to their coach much more than to their female teacher. But what about the women? The women in the lives of these men? Because, a lot of our men, from they were boys, their lives were dominated by women. This may sound away, folks, but some time ago in a workshop, a man told me that, this is Dr. Semaj, I'm tired of dealing with panty government. I grew up with my mother and my grandmother. All through school, all my teachers were women. I've been working for about 20 years now. All my managers have been women. Now, hear the contradiction, hear the paradox of this. There's something about the male personality. Growing up as a boy, at some point, you have to resist your mother so you don't become your mother. But the problem is that resistance of your mother, if she's the only person who is talking sense in your life, you could be doomed. So that we have to find a way. If that's all we have to work with, we have to find a way to work with it. Women play a crucial role. Mothers often become the first mirror through which boys see themselves. Teachers shape confidence. Grandmothers provide emotional grounding. Wives often become healing space for wounded men. The goal is not dependence. The goal is partnership. Saving boys is not just men work alone. It's society's work. So that we have to find a way now, how do we incorporate these women into the process? Because they are the first line. And many times inadvertently, again, I remember one of my sons, when he was in prep school, he was very observant about the gender disparity. And one of the questions I remember asking me, Dad, the only thing a man can be in the school is either be the sports master or the security guard, because there were no other males. I had to explain to him, no, that's not true. A man can be anything. Another time he said, but Dad, in my class, the female teacher, she only calls on the girls. The boys raise their hand and they're ignored. And anything, if you say something, you get punished immediately. That's a whole nother contradiction we have to keep looking at too. What is happening? So this healing, it requires, is from every level. It's from every level. The wound does not disappear. It travels into marriages, into parenting, into leadership style, into the way that a man treats himself when no one is watching. Healing is about what happens to men in brotherhood, whether they know it or not. The barber shop, the sports team, the market, the domino table. These spaces of male community are often dismissed as trivial, but they are in fact informal therapeutic environment. I've always said we have to find a way to incorporate this into the process, into the healing process. Years ago, I had a television show. I was asked by the TV station to create a show called Man Talk to address maleness and gender, man and masculinity and so on. The first thing I did, I created a set that was basically a bar, and I was the bartender, and my main guest would be sitting directly at the bar, and then I had some tables and chairs where some men, some taxi men, would come in during the show, taping the show, and sit there and play domino. And if they liked what the conversation that they were hearing, technically they were the studio audience, they would come up to the bar. The station was upset with me. Why am I turning this thing into a bar? I said, but what do you want me to do? Have some couches where men come in and just sit and cut their ten and have polite conversation? That's the context in which men have conversation. A bar. I am the bartender. You go to speak to your bartender. If you understand bartenders and barbers and hairdressers, they are an incredible part of the mental health establishment. They are the people that a lot of people first go to for advice. The show was a hit. The show was a hit because we were able to deal with issues that impacted men. Why is that show not on television still? I see no reason why it isn't. We need to create a similar show. We have to. Now, how can men save themselves? Men need other men. Brotherhood matters. Mentorship matters. Guidance matters. Every man listening to this show should ask, who am I mentoring? If one help one, you realize the exponential capability of that? Every man listening to this show should ask, who is learning from my life? You can learn from good or from bad, you know. I remember some years ago, I was a guest speaker at the launch of a Father's Day 5K. And a gentleman involved in the process, he asked to say something, and he stood up and he said, people, my father is my role model. And he paused, of what not to be. You understand that? Sometimes even in your negative, you can provide positive advice. He says he saw the impact. He saw what alcoholism did. He saw what anger. He saw what emotional violence did. And he said to himself, that is not what I want to be. No way that's the person I want to be. So his father became his negative role model. Men who are hearing this show, ask yourself though, who is observing my integrity? Who is watching how I handle adversity? Who is seeing my example? A nation without mentors becomes a nation without direction. I frequently refer to a recent hit song called Drift. Not to emphasize or to promote the dance move or so on, but it's indicative of where we are as a people. We are drifting. We are drifting. So these questions have to be asked. Men heal in brotherhood. So, gentlemen, we have to be there for each other. These spaces, let's start with these spaces that already exist. The barber shop, the bar, the sports team. Let's start there. Healing looks like meaning. Men who have a reason, a genuine, non-negotiable reason for their lives, tend to navigate their pain more effectively. Purpose is not a luxury. For men especially, it's a survival tool. We have to redefine masculine purpose. We have to focus these energies. Now, I want to turn to something I've spent a great deal of my time thinking about and writing about it. And you'll have seen it if you're a mind traveler, if you're one of my mind travelers who are dealing with the whole Semaj MindSpa. And I believe it is directly relevant to this conversation about saving our men. It's what I call the anchor leg. For those of you who are new to the MindSpa family, let me explain. In a relay race, particularly 4x400, which is Jamaican's obsession for good reason, the anchor leg is the final leg. It is run by the fastest, most experienced member of the team. It is not a position of exhaustion. It's a position of culmination, of mastery, of the accumulated wisdom of everything that came before. I apply this framework to the second half of life. And specifically today, I want to apply it to the question of masculine purpose. Because I think one of the least examined drivers of male suffering is the crisis of identity that comes when a man traditional roles begin to slip. He doesn't see where he fits. One of the things that I frequently remind people of, my most important achievement, not my academic degrees and my recognition by industry, and my most important is that I've actively participated in the positive socialization of 6 adults from children. I've been there for them right through. And when you attend those graduations and the smile on your face, the sense of achievement each time when I have reasons to talk about my children. A lot of men will never know that because they never took an active part, right? That to me is critical, especially as you're in that anchor leg. For many men, identity is entirely constructed around performance, around provision, around what they produce, what they earn, what they control. And there's nothing inherently wrong with any of those things. Productivity and provisions are honorable. But when they're the only source of identity, a man becomes extraordinarily vulnerable to the moments when those things are disruptive. Unemployment, health challenges, retirement, the departure of children, the shifting of partnership. These are not rare events. These are the ordinary transitions of life lived in its fullness. But they can land on an unexamined man like an ambush. I remember during the hurricane, Melissa, I saw an article in the paper and I followed up the story. There was a man who was bemoaning the fact that his business was destroyed by the hurricane. His house was destroyed by the hurricane. He lived alone. He desperately needed help. But then he went on to say that he has 7 children living in different parts of Jamaica. And he said all of them were doing well, but not one has reached out to help him. Now, clearly for me, there's more to that story than that. There's more to that story. But those are times when the realities jump out. The man who navigate those transitions best are the men who have cultivated what the psychologist Howard Gardner might call a broader identity, who have developed friendships, interests, community of meaning that exists alongside their protective role and their productive one. And there are men who have taken seriously the idea that the second half of life is not a slow withdrawal from relevance, but an opportunity to run the fastest lap. I have something called my centenary decathlon, the centenarian decathlon, adopted from the work of Peter Attia, and where you identify the things that you enjoy doing and you wish to do in the final decade of your life, whatever it is. So you start preparing from now. And a couple of things I have on my list, One is playing golf with my sons, or having a gym session with my sons. And I give thanks that at 74, I'm able to do so. When I play golf with my sons, nobody's, Dad, can I help you? Dad, you need help? Dad, should we wait for you? I am, pardon the pun, I'm on par with them. When we go to the gym, no, I can say, even at 74, the old guy kind of outshining them in terms of what my bench presses and my leg presses and so on, because that's my aspiration. I remember one of my sons saying, he was telling, so he told a friend of his, he's going to meet his dad this morning. They're going to have breakfast and they go to the gym together. His friend looked at him, going to the gym with your father? Because their fathers, the only exercise that their fathers did was, you raise the beard and you put it back down when you finish and so on. So I think I'm maintaining that which I set out to be, because that's what you want to do. That's what, if you don't set out to be that, to navigate this, you have to set out, identify it in terms of what you're going to be doing at what time. I think about the men I know and admire in their 60s and 70s and 80s, the ones who are vital, engaged, purposeful, joyful. They share a certain quality. They have relationships they have tended with care. They have bodies they have respected. Exercise, nutrition, sleep. They have minds that they have kept active and curious. They have causes larger than themselves. And perhaps most importantly, they have made peace with who they are, not in a passive, resigned way, but in a way that is deeply anchored and deeply free. That is the anchor leg. I want to invite every man listening today, young, middle age, older, to begin thinking about that leg, because the preparation for the anchor leg begins long before you arrive at it. The decisions you make about your physical health in your 30s, the relationships you invest in during your 40s, the emotional work you do or do not do in your 50s, all of it shapes what you're able to run when that baton comes to you in the anchor leg. Saving our men is not only about crisis intervention, as this is necessary, but it's also about transformation, about helping men construct an identity robust enough to carry them through the full arc of life. An identity that is not brittle because it was built on only one thing, but supple and strong because it was built on many things. That's what we want. So what do? We have spent the last 45 minutes understand the crisis and the context. Now let's get practical. Let me give you something to carry out of this broadcast into your life. If you are a parent, a mother, what else? If you are a father, if you are a grandparent, auntie, uncle, the single most important you can do for the boys in your care is to create a space where feelings are permitted, where they can feel and express those feelings. Not rewarded, not punished, not interrogated, simply permitted. When a boy cries, resist the reflex to say, "Stop crying," and instead, "Tell me what's happening." It's a small thing that changes everything. You're teaching him that his emotional life has a place. And the man who knows that, who learns it early, is a man who is far less likely to become a statistic. If you're an educator, if you work in a school, a community program, a church youth group, I'm asking you to look at what a model. What are you doing? Boys are watching the men around them with extraordinary attention. They're asking, what does it look like to be a man? And if every adult male they see is either performing in vulnerability or suffering in silence, that is what they will learn to be. Be the man who shows them a different picture. If you're a woman in a relationship with a man, I want to speak to you directly and carefully. Men often need an invitation into an emotional conversation, not a demand, not an ultimatum, an invitation. The approach matters. Timing matters. And when he does open up, how you respond in that first moment of vulnerability will determine whether he ever opens up again. Receive it well. Receive it without weaponizing it, without minimizing it, without immediately trying to fix it. Simply receive it. That is transformation. It took him a long time. One of the things that, I remind managers, I do a lot of work with companies, with business, that if and when a man, steps, you see him outside your office door or in the passageway, or you see him and say, "Excuse me, boss, I can talk to you about something," your answer should be yes. And you'll find as soon as you can facilitate it, can you do it now? All right, give me a few minutes and stop by the office. Why I say that man took days, weeks, and sometimes months to get to the point where he could ask that conversation. A lot of men are very slow to open up because of the context of their life. They know very few people that they could actually trust with their emotions, that they could actually ask a question. So that if you are in a position as such, a supervisor, a manager, anybody who has some kind of authority, who that man has pre-selected and respects, you are an important source. If you're a man listening today, and I hope many of you are, I hope you snuck this in your car or in your yard or in your workshop, wherever it is that you're hearing this. I'm talking to you. And the nice thing about how this process works, this information will first be heard on a radio broadcast, free to air. And then this information will be heard via the internet. And this information will be heard via a YouTube channel and segments of it via reel. So I'm doing my part to get this out into the ecosphere. If you're a man listening to this, you do not have to figure this out alone. You do not have to carry it all. You do not have to be fine when you're not fine. There's not a single thing that makes you less a man when you reach for help. There's only the version of you that suffers unnecessarily The version of you who decides to change that. Choose the second version. The version who chooses to change that. Your life and the lives of everyone around you depends on this. Choose to change. Choose to change. Now, how do you wrap this up? It's important that we start bringing this flight down as we come towards the close of this show. We talked about a crisis that is hiding in plain sight, the quiet suffering of our boys and men, and the enormous cost of that suffering to us all. We traced much of this, the origins of male silence, how it is built into boyhood brick by brick until it becomes the architecture of a man's inner life. We explore that healing actually looks like, not the magazine version, but the real, practical, dignified work of a man coming to his own emotional health. And we talk about purpose, the anchor leg, the idea that the best is not behind any man, but ahead of him, waiting to run. This conversation does not end when this program ends. I want you to take it home. Take it to your dinner table. Take it to your barber shop. Take it to your school board meeting. Take it to your next conversation with your son, with your brother, with your father, with your neighbor. Because saving a boy and saving our men is not the work of a radio show. It's the work of a community. And it begins one conversation at a time. So this is the national call to action. Imagine a Jamaica where every boy can read confidently. Every boy as a mentor. Every boy learns emotional intelligence. Can you imagine that? Every boy learning emotional intelligence. Every boy learns conflict resolution. Every boy understands responsibility. Every boy sees a future worth pursuing. That is not fantasy. That's a choice, folks. The future of Jamaica will not be determined primarily by what happens in Parliament. Definitely not. It will be determined by what happens in homes, in schools, in churches, in communities. My mantra, one of my most basic statements is that home is the first school. Parents are the first teachers. Everything else is extra lesson. Too many of our boys are depending totally on extra lesson. And some of the, I should say, not just so much of the extra lesson does not have their best interest at heart. What happens in the minds of our boys? Because if we save our boys, we save our men. If we save our men, we save our families. If we save our families, we save our communities. And if we save our communities, we save our nation. The pieces are connected. So I leave you with a Semaj MindSpa thought. Every great nation is built twice. First, in the imagination of its children. And then in the actions of its adults. If we want a stronger society tomorrow, we must invest in our boys today. If not, the consequences are dire. We see the basic framework that has occurred so far. We see the pieces, and we're not happy with it. we see the pieces, we see the consequences. Much of it is destructive, it is violent, it is depressing. So that we have to do some things that are different. We have to look at the schools, the curricula. We have to have genuinely uncomfortable conversations about how are we socializing our boys? What are the active sources of mentorship? It means role models who demonstrate that intelligence and emotional literacy and strength are not mutually exclusive things. It means showing a boy that the most powerful things he can do is to know himself. And the idea is for us to, make time to be part of this process. Because just by default, if you are not part of the solutions, by default, you're part of the problem. I remember having a conversation with some boys who were in a juvenile detention facility. And I started my remarks with a phrase that I have always wanted to use. Young men, know that I have your attention. Because many of them were there with serious sentences and they would not be going anywhere for a while. So now we have your attention. Let us talk. Let us talk. So folks, this is one of the most critical things that we can do. We keep kicking the can down the road. Yes, we have a month where we call it Men's Mental Health Month, but what do we do? Father's Day exists on paper, but nothing compared to what we see in terms of Mother's Day. We have a ministry that talks about gender. What is it they do for men? So that those of us men who have a vested interest and a consciousness, I believe that we have a responsibility to talk up, to say something, to do something. So that's why this discussion is here. That's why this program exists. And we have to be there on a personal level. One of the things that I do, anywhere I see a conversation and I see young men or even middle-aged men talking and they're saying things that I could add value to, I introduce myself to the conversation. So folks, I'm encouraging you all to do that. I want to thank you for taking the time to be part of the Semaj MindSpa radio. And remember, I'm eternally optimist because I know that the best is yet to come. The best is yet to come. So let's make it happen.